This module, I want to look at trademark law. And I'll say at the outset, most of trademark law is best left to the lawyers, which is to say, from a business point of view, as you think about trademark law, really what you want to think about is branding and advertising, which are other things that would be better covered in other courses. So a lot of important things to say, for instance, about how do you choose a good trademark, when do you diversify your trademarks across products and enterprises. There's all sorts of fun stuff to think about that really isn't what the lawyers do well. So while we think about trademark law, I want to keep it a little thin. I want to make sure that all of us understand what can serve as a trademark, and I want to build up some of the rules about what you can get from the law, but I intentionally want to leave out advertising, marketing, the creative aspects. That's all super important, but it doesn't really fit well in trademark law per se. Where do I want to start? Well, I want to start with just to make sure we all understand that trademark law is totally different from patent law, copyright law, and trade secret law. Trademark law is law that's trying to help with communication. We're not trying to encourage the creation of trademarks. That's a really big difference. Right? Patent law, we were trying to encourage the creation of patent-eligible things. Copyright law, we wanted to encourage the creation of copyright-eligible things. Trade secret law, in part, we want to get everyone to calm down and not spend as much money on secret keeping. But more, we want to encourage the creation of trade secret-eligible things. Trademark law? Trademark law is not about, we really wish we had more trademarks in the world. It's just about facilitating communication between buyers and sellers. If it were easy to walk into the restaurant and say, I'd like a bubbly brown liquid with the following ingredients in it, bottled in Minnesota, I wouldn't need the word Coke. My description would do just fine. But because that's awful and hard to say and hard to get out, and people might not even know what words to say, we instead support the idea that we'll let the company pick a word, Coke, we'll let them imbue it with meaning, and now the conversation works between buyers and sellers. I walk into the restaurant, I say, I'd like Coke. They say, I'm sorry, we don't have Coke. Will Pepsi do? And I say, no, Pepsi won't do. So I'm trying to help the conversation because having a good conversation then lets the market take off. There's an incentive for Coke to make the same product week after week, because I'm going to ask for it, to make it good so that once I try it the first time and I like it, hey, what is this? It's Coke. Okay, I'm going to ask for Coke next time by name. It gets all the incentives to work to make the marketplace work. But the law's ambition, to help the communication, to make it clean, clear, non-confusing, no trickery, so I know I can ask for the product I want and I get it, even if I couldn't come up with the full, precise, articulate sentence without using the shorthand, the trademark. Let's look at the law real briefly. We define at the federal level what a trademark is, and here is the key language. A trademark includes any word, name, symbol, or device, or any combination thereof. I have a drawing, I have a word, I have the word in isolation, I have the word in a particular typeface, I have a whatever, anything, any word, name, symbol, device, used by a person, or which a person has a bona fide intention to use in commerce to identify and distinguish his or her goods, including a unique product, from those manufactured or sold by others, and to indicate the source of the goods, even if that source is unknown. So what is it? The opening language, a word, name, symbol, device, almost anything. We'll look at examples in a minute, but colors, sounds, characters, you name it. Trademark is almost anything that could serve this purpose. And what's the purpose? Well, I'm going to use it or intend to use it. Under federal law, I can step forward and claim my trademark before I use it. Right? Before I invest, before I spend money marketing and printing labels and so on. Hey, I'm about to roll out this new thing, you never heard of it. It's called Coke. And I grab, it's the intent to use. But it's anything that I can use or intend to use to identify and distinguish my goods from those manufactured or sold by others, and indicate me as the source. Right? Don't think of this as indicating it's from Minnesota. The point is it's me, it's mine. You wanted to buy the drink made by me, the Lichtman Company drink. And I've got a word that now makes it easy for you to say, that's the beverage I want. So federal law is really open in terms of anything that can serve this purpose of identifying and distinguishing the goods. That can be a trademark. When are you going to see trademarks in practice? A couple moments. One instance where you're going to have to talk about trademarks is you're going to want to acquire rights. You have a new product, a new business, and you want to get some vocabulary words that you will ultimately use to talk with your customers. You'll talk about trademark law at that moment. You'll also talk about trademark law at moments where you want to use a word, maybe to describe your product, and you're told you can't. Right? I want to describe my burger as the great big burger. And it's great, it really is. It's big, it's huge. But it might turn out that someone else has the phrase great big burger, and now I'm going to have to work with the lawyers of, can I use that phrase? How? And the answer is yes, you can. Just make sure you use it in a way that's not going to confuse people. So don't do a capital G and a capital B in big font. Then it's going to look like it's a trademark use. But if in text I want to say, hey, my burger has pickles, lettuce, tomato, it's really great and it's big. Fine. But a time you'll talk to the trademark lawyers is you want to use a word, a color, a phrase, and there's some reason that maybe I can't because someone else is using it as a trademark. Sometimes you'll be talking to your trademark lawyers because you want to do comparative ads. And I want to use the other guy's trademark to identify him. There's these great ads a couple years back for Apple versus Microsoft. And Apple was not shy about it. They referred to the other product as a Microsoft product. And that's fine. Right? There are rules about using other people's marks in truthful comparative advertisements. You'll talk to your lawyers in that situation also. The last situation, and we'll say more about all of these in the course of the module, but the last big situation is what I call a technology wrinkle. We're really struggling with how to think about trademarks online right now. For instance, when I go to Google and I type in Rosetta Stone, a trademark for a particular company's software that teaches you Spanish, German, French, whatever. When I type in Rosetta Stone, Google interprets it as, hey, he's looking to learn a language, and they might give you something else back. Might give you an ad for a Pimsleur, a competing way to learn a language, or give you an ad for a website that is giving away illegal copies of the Rosetta Stone software. Not what Rosetta Stone wanted. We have a bunch of these cases about, are these acceptable ways to use trademarks? My example here, Google is using the trademark Rosetta Stone, but they're using it to mean you're looking to learn a language, rather than using it to mean software put out by that company. So these are the kinds of scenarios, again, we're going to look at all these now, but you might need to get a trademark right. You might have to dodge one as you're trying to write your own stuff or do comparative advertising, and then these special technology settings. These are the big moments for trademark law in everyday business life. Let's start with a couple more of the basics. If you qualify to register in the federal system, you will. Which is to say the federal government's come in, just like for copyright and patent, federal government stepped in and made a federal trademark system. And if you qualify, about which we'll discuss in a moment, if you qualify, you're going to go there. Federal system is fantastic. It gives you very strong rights, gives you those rights nationwide. You're going to go to the federal system. If you don't qualify, though, well, we'll go there, but let's add that point, then we'll get to it in the slides. If you don't qualify, there are fallback state systems. So where I want to go here is the federal system, but just to get the full thought out, if you qualify in the federal system, you're going to go there. We'll look at that now. If you don't, one interesting thing about trademark law is there is a state system sitting there. So in patent law, if you don't make the federal system, there's no other patent law for you. In copyright law, if you don't make the federal system, there's only a tiny shred of a system at the state level. It's basically gone. Trade secret law is state law. Trademark law is both. There is a local kind of state view of trademark and a federal view. And what I want to say at this point in the deck is, if you qualify for the feds, you're going to go there. It's cheap to enroll in the federal system, and it gives you rights everywhere that are clean, easy, enforceable rights. So if you qualify federally, easy. You register federally, and as I say in the slide, you can register almost anything federally. So NBC's chimes, the little chime pattern that they use when they're identifying it's an NBC station, the da-da-da, that pattern, great, can be registered federally. The roar of the MGM lion, fine, can register that too. And all sorts of stuff can get in the federal system. And indeed, pink, right? The color pink counts, right? In this particular setting, when you see pink insulation, you might not know the name of the company, but you know that one company makes pink insulation, because in general, insulation wasn't pink before them. So you can register almost anything. Here's what the federal system talks about it. They say, look, marks that are inherently distinctive can be registered right away. What I mean by inherently distinctive, I mean, for example, a made-up word. Kodak. You can register that right away in the federal system if you were first, obviously, to make up the word. It's a made-up word. It doesn't mean anything. It is inherently distinctive. Once you start selling Kodak brand cameras, everyone's going to know it's you. No issue. We're happy to give you that word. It's a completely fanciful word, made up. You can take that and run with it. Right? I might be nervous to give you a word like camera. That's not distinctive at all. We call them all cameras. I might be nervous to give you a word like digital camera. There's going to be a bunch of those too. But a word like Kodak, no problem. It's a fanciful word. It's yours. Exxon, the same. Right? And these can be very strong trademarks too. Right? These are words that I can suggest you immediately know what I'm talking about. If I make up a word and then get it out there and use it successfully, that's going to then be a very effective trademark as we go out and use it in commerce. When I say Exxon, you all know what I'm talking about. So these kind of made up words, the fanciful words, those get on immediately. You register, you say, I intend to use it, federal system will let you in right away. Another category that is inherently distinctive still are words that are real words, but don't usually show up in this scenario. It's kind of arbitrary that you're using that word. I love the example of camel for cigarettes, right? Camels, as far as I can tell, have nothing to do with cigarettes. And so it's a real word. It's not fanciful, but it's arbitrary. Could have called it donkey. Could have called it elephant. Could have called it table cigarettes. It's fine. It's inherently distinctive. Once you start rolling out product and calling it camel, you're going to have quick association of that word and you. Apple. It's a regular word, but again, fits this category in that it is arbitrary to use an apple for technology products. Fine. Inherently distinctive. You can register these things right away. There's this other category which trademark lawyers call suggestive trademarks. And they're not as clean as the fanciful ones or the arbitrary ones, but the federal system takes these right away also. What's a suggestive trademark? Well, Tide is a good example, right? I'm not actually describing the cleaning detergent. I didn't say clean, cleanly, dirt-free, bubbly. I'm not describing it. But when I say Tide, you think of the tide flowing in, flowing out. It's beautiful, clean, crystal clear water. I guess it depends what beach you're on, but go with me, right? A tide suggests the properties of cleanliness. That's why it's used as the name for the detergent. And the federal system says, look, if it's suggestive, no problem. That can get registered too. Copper tone for suntan lotion, the same idea, right? I'm suggesting something about how your skin will look. It's not descriptive of the product. It's suggestive of the experience. Fine. So the federal system will let you register a bunch of stuff, right? Fanciful words, arbitrary things like camel, and suggestive things. If you want to be descriptive, then to get on the federal system, you have to show what's called secondary meaning. What do I mean by all that? Think of the trademark rollerblade. It is descriptive, right? You take a blade of an ice skate and you intellectually swap it out and put rollers there. It's descriptive. So it doesn't fit any of the earlier buckets. It is not inherently distinctive. When I say rollerblade, I might just be describing the product rather than telling you where it comes from. So what the federal system says is, sure, you can put a note in the federal system that you're going for it, you're aiming for rollerblade, warn folks, but we're not going to actually officially register in the official list till you come back and show us secondary meaning. Show us that people associate this word with you. They don't think, hey, it's a rollerblade. They think, I know what company that made. And again, they don't have to know which company in the sense of it's a company registered in Delaware with principal offices in Kansas. No, they just have to know it's you. I bought from you, I want to buy from you again. Rollerblade, that's who I want to buy this from. So if you have a mark that is descriptive, to get in the federal system, you must show secondary meaning. You've got to show that you have successfully gotten customers to associate this with you. You might do that by a survey, for instance. Get a marketing survey going, and now show that, yeah, people have turned the corner. Just like my great big sandwich example. Right? The first time I say, would you like a great big sandwich? You think I'm describing it. It's great and it's big. If over time, when I say great big sandwich, yeah, one of those sandwiches from Lichtman's restaurant, totally would love that. And now we've got secondary meaning. Now I can register federally. The federal system will not allow you to register something immoral, deceptive, or lacking needed secondary meaning. So you can't come into the full federal system, what we call the permanent registry. You can't get into the full federal system unless you clear these hurdles. And if it's immoral, if it's deceptive, right, I describe it in a way that misdescribes it, or if I don't have my secondary meaning, you can't get on. And the famous one here is the Redskins logo. Should that be allowed to be registered as a federal trademark, or did we cross a line and it's just not the kind of thing we want people to use to identify here their sporting team? Do we want to force folks to choose a different word by not allowing it to come into our trademark system? All right, priority rules. This is the reason why you want to be excited about being in the federal system, but also why I wanted to tell you about the non-federal systems too. Let's do that in 2 steps. If you register in the federal system, so give me something arbitrary, fanciful, give me something suggestive, give me something descriptive that has secondary meaning. If you get into the federal system, now you have that nationwide. And again, you could even do intent to use. I'm going to do it, give it to me nationwide. Now I will spend and run my Super Bowl ad and boom, define my trademark to my customer base. If I register, it's mine nationwide in my category. So for the most part, I'll take my word and then articulate, I'm going to use it on clothing items. And great, I get my word in clothing items, but I don't get it everywhere. Just to use an example, you might know, think of United. United is a word's trademark, and it's a trademark for an airline, but it's also a trademark for a van line. It's a totally different company, right? United Van Lines moves things around the country in big trucks. United Airline moves things around the country in the air, and both of those could be registered because they're being used in distinct markets, and so we don't have any worries about allowing both words. So if you register, you get nationwide coverage in your category. You can keep adding categories, and some marks go everywhere. Ultimately, some marks we say we're going to give them a whole bunch of categories because it's such a dominant mark. People expect that that mark will be on clothing and kids products and food products and you name it. But if you register, you get nationwide rights in your category. If you don't register, that means you didn't qualify or you didn't think to register. That's when you fall back into that state system. And in the state system, what you basically get is what you've earned, so where you are actively using it in the state, plus what the courts talk about as a zone of expansion. So we get it, your business is going to grow over time. It'll grow a little bit in terms of products. It might grow a little bit in terms of geography. And the state systems would give you a little bit of reasonable room to expand. Again, you want to be in the federal system if you can. I'd so much rather have the entire country for my category than have what I have earned to the extent I can prove it up in court later, plus an undefined zone of expansion. So this world is moving heavily into the federal system, which makes sense. right? Commerce is now not necessarily limited by state boundaries. You go on Amazon and buy from the world. And so we want trademark law to also have this good, sweeping federal footprint. Okay, so we have a sense of what you can get as a trademark. Sound, a color, almost anything. How to register, and what you get when you register. What kind of rights you get geographically. Now we need to think about what is infringement of a trademark. If I have this mark, what can I stop other folks from doing? The law here is messy and verbose, and we don't need it. All you got to do is realize that we're trying to stop confusion because we want communication to be clean and easy. We want you to be able to walk into the restaurant and say Coke and get a Coke, not a Pepsi. We want you to look at an ad and understand, is it from the company I like or is it from somebody else? Right? We're just looking to stamp out confusion. And you can ditch all the fancy legal speak if you focus on, will this act cause confusion? If it won't, it's not a problem. Right? Stay with my silly example about the great big sandwich. If I just have a line of text saying, I have a really good, great, big, huge sandwich, that didn't make you think it came from the company that had branded the great big sandwich. No confusion, no issue. Right? Just watch for confusion. Confusion as to source, confusion as to sponsorship. I list here initial interest confusion. Don't sucker punch me. Right? Don't have a big ad on the side of the highway with a giant yellow M and a picture of a hamburger because your name is McGillicuddy. Even if you fix that, I pull off the highway, and as I pull in, the restaurant says McGillicuddy's Burgers. You still confused me. You got me to get off the highway. I initially was interested because I thought that M was the McDonald's Golden Arches, and I wanted a Big Mac. Initial interest confusion. You can't sucker punch people in that way. Post-sale confusion too. This is a little bit dicier in the cases, but if you buy a watch and it has a trademark that looks a heck of a lot like a very fancy mark, that might cause trouble, not for the buyer. Look, when I go into an alley and I buy a watch for $5, I know it's not the real deal. But when I then wear the watch with my suit and tie and I'm out in the world, that might cause confusion for other people. They'll look at that and say, wow, that must be a Gucci watch. And then they'll see it's really bad quality and it doesn't keep good time and the strap is fading. That's going to cause confusion in the marketplace, not at the moment of sale. Again, I knew when I went into the alley I was buying a fake, but after the sale confusion. If you can tell me a story about confusion, a story that has a consequence economically, then people will reasonably be confused. We're having a story about infringement. And again, the lawyers will then put it in the fancy bucket. Look for confusion. That's the key to knowing if there is infringement. In addition to confusion, there's a couple other things to point out under this category of dilution. The Federal Trademark Act, in addition to stopping confusion, for famous marks, stops what's called dilution. And there are really two kinds of dilution, blurring and tarnishment. Blurring is if the famous mark is getting used and used and used and used and used, such that there's just too much of it. Think of the MC of McDonald's. Right, McDonald's has McThises and McThats, and they cover a lot of product types, having a McRib, a McChicken sandwich, whatever it is. They cover a lot of stuff. It's a very famous mark in the eyes of the federal system. And so we say, look, you can't open up something totally different, say a babysitting service, and call it McBaby. Even though McDonald's doesn't have the McBaby, and they're not going to have the McBaby, the point is it's a really famous mark, and we don't want a whole bunch of other people micking everything. So unless your name truly is McDonald or Macmillan, something where you have your own independent claim to the M and the C, we're not going to let you do it. It's blurring. It's not even necessarily that it's going to cause confusion. It's just going to overwhelm people with seeing MC used all over in commerce, and that makes it less distinct when McDonald's does it. Blurring. Tarnishment is a different concept. Tarnishment is, again, only for famous marks, but if I take the MC of McDonald's and I use it to do McProstitution, whether it's blurring or not, it's a problem. Right? And the federal law says if you have a famous mark, we're not going to let other people get real close to it and then do something that would turn off the customer base, something immoral, something repulsive for some reason. And so there's this tarnishment theory saying not that you introduce confusion, right? No one thinks McDonald's went into the prostitution business. No confusion, but tarnishment. Again, the federal system does it only for famous marks, which the federal law had to define and is tortured, but big name, well-known marks get protection beyond confusion for overexposure, that's blurring, or for bad associations, that's tarnishment. All right, if you're accused of dilution, or more importantly, confusion, infringement, what are the defenses? Well, the obvious one is, no, I'm not. I'm not confusing. That's really clear. No one's confused. It's a comparative ad, and I made clear that I'm Apple, and I'm not Microsoft, and I'm comparing our products honestly and pointing out differences between them. Right? I might answer the obvious way. There is no confusion here. And that obviously would end the case if I'm right. Beyond that, though, there are other things to think about. One is to argue that the mark was generic. So the word might have begun and had special meaning in the beginning, but it doesn't anymore. So I can use it too. Think of the word Kleenex. Kleenex started as a made-up word to identify a particular tissue. And indeed, it was Kleenex brand tissues. But over time, people began to call every tissue a Kleenex. And that made the mark be vulnerable to this defense. Now look, I can use the word Kleenex because it doesn't mean a particular source anymore. Its real meaning is it's a tissue. And so I'm going to use it too. Xerox had this problem, right? And they would run ads to try to fight back. This is a real ad they would run in the newspaper. You can't Xerox a Xerox on a Xerox. Right? What are they saying? Don't use Xerox as a verb. Don't use Xerox as a noun for the output of a copying machine. Xerox means our copying machine, right? And they say, right? But we don't mind at all if you copy a copy on a Xerox copier. In fact, we prefer it because the Xerox trademark should only identify products made by us, like Xerox copiers, printers, fax machines, and the like. As a trademark, the term Xerox should always be used as an adjective followed by a noun and never as a verb. Of course, helping us protect our trademark also helps you because you'll continue to get what you're asking for and not an inferior copy. Right? Generic, it's a big risk if your word is used not to mean you, but to mean the category of product you serve. Google has this problem, right? People talk about Googling something and they might say, hey, let's use Bing. Although I guess no one really uses Bing. But in theory, I might Google on Bing, and the way we use the word, Google means to search on the internet. And Google is fighting back, trying to make sure that we understand Google is not a generic word for searching the internet. Google is instead a word for searching on the Google search utility. It's a problem Xerox had too. Another defense, again, beyond the obvious one, the idea of the mark being generic, is functionality. So if my trademark is the shape of my bottle and you copy it, you might say, look, I get it. There's going to be some confusion, but I copied it for its functional reasons. It's a great shape. It doesn't have a lot of backflow of the air. It doesn't spill, whatever. I took it for the functional reasons. And trademark doesn't protect function. Right? Just like copyright law has that idea-expression dichotomy, and we say that copyright law doesn't protect ideas, trademark law doesn't protect function. Function might accidentally serve to identify source. Oh, that bottle, that's the one made by Coke, isn't it? But to the extent it is about function, trademark law won't stop others from copy, even if it causes confusion. Another defense, and this is messier, is the idea that my use wasn't a trademark use. And the law is struggling with exactly where this line is. I kind of want to bleed it into what I think of the hard cases in this area, which are these technology cases. So I pointed out the Rosetta Stone example, right, where Google lets you type a trademark, Rosetta Stone, and then they don't use it just to give you Rosetta Stone. The company behind Rosetta Stone wants that. Right? When you type Rosetta Stone, they want you to be sent to their website for only legal copies of their software. But Google wants to think of it as communication. When you say Rosetta Stone to Google, what you mean is, I'd like to learn a foreign language, please. Google has this issue with its AdWords program also. Right? If I am running a business, say I want to do after-school tutoring, and I know the dominant player right now is, say, Sylvan Learning Centers. Can I pay Google that every time the word Sylvan Learning Centers are typed in, that my ad for Lichtman Learning shows up? And again, the courts are trying to figure out what do we do with this? Maybe this is okay, right? Put the legal nicety aside of, is it a trademark use? Does it cause confusion? Maybe the first thing we should say is maybe it's fine, right? In the store, when you go to get a particular medicine, always on the shelf next to the medicine you go for is a look-alike medicine with the same active ingredient under a different name, but packaged similarly. And we think of that as competition, right? That's how you say, well, maybe I will buy Dimetap, but man, the store brand that has the exact same functionality is cheaper and looks the same color liquid, similar shaped bottle, and so on, right? Maybe Google's just doing that. So they're using trademarks the way we would in the store. I'd walk into the store and say, I want Dimetap. And the nice clerk would walk me to the shelf that has that and other competing products. Maybe that's exactly what Google's doing. If so, if we think this is the right way to do it, or if we think this is what consumers understand. I know when I type into Google the word Rosetta Stone that I'm going to get a bunch of stuff, not just Rosetta. Maybe we want to say it's okay, and one way courts have been saying it's okay is by saying these aren't trademark uses, that we're using this to ask a question to Google, but not using it in a classic trademark way. Other courts would argue that there's no confusion here, that this is comparative advertising. There's a bunch of ways to think about it. I view this as the most interesting part of trademark law, which is to say trademarks itself are really interesting. Coming up with the right word to make your product go is huge. Obviously, it's not a law issue. It's an advertising branding issue. When you think of the law issues, trademark law, I always think is pretty straightforward. Give me a clean word that really means you and don't confuse anyone. But then this part, these kind of new technology uses of marks, that's where things I think get really interesting and are still in flux even today.